viewers. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I am Irina Litchfield, and I'm covering for Kyle today. And such an honor to be talking to you today about impact investing. First of all, it is so wonderful to have this opportunity for us to connect with each other, dear guests, and build truly connected networks from all over the world. I mean, today earlier, Gary and I were in Singapore, 7 a.m. my time, talking about deep tech. Today, we'll be speaking about the investments in impact. And I would love to start with you, Gary. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Gary Fowler. I felt like schizophrenia for a second. Myself, there's two of us. Anyhow, I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been over 30 years worth of entrepreneurial activities. I've done now 16 startups. I've been involved in 2 unicorns. So a little tiny company in Haifa, Israel, we brought to the US. I was on the original team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce about 13 or 14 months ago for 1.35 billion. And I also am the co-founder of Yva, which is one of the top 10 AI HR tech companies. And I just love AI. I am also the CEO and co-founder of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios. And we curate AI companies from around the world, and we help them come to Silicon Valley. We take operational roles in those companies. And the idea is to create some more unicorns. So we love unicorn breeding.
Unicorn breeding. It sounds wonderful, Gary.
And it goes with your background, Irina.
Yeah, yes, I did. And Keith, what about you? Could you please kindly introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks very much. It's great to be back on the show with some familiar faces and some new faces. Welcome to the show, Lucy. Looking forward to learning about you. So I've been an investor in clean tech for 20 years. Before that, I was an entrepreneur focused on software and media. But after the dot-com collapse, I had been headhunted into Mitsubishi Corporation. They stopped investing in that area, and they had me refocused onto this, what we later called clean tech, clean energy and environmental investments, which turns out to be very important, having an enormous measurable impact. After that, I became president of BASF Venture Capital America, BASF being the world's largest chemical company. Again, very measurable impact, especially as I want to talk about on the show today in the agricultural technology investments. It's one of the biggest areas that you can have a measurable environmental impact. I carried that passion on into Pangea Ventures, where I raised and made the investments in Funds 3 and Fund 4. Especially, I continued to focus more on agricultural and food investments. I've now developed a new investment thesis, and I'm launching a brand new company, sort of a hybrid between VC and PE, but still continue my passion for impact and believe that it can be well aligned with great economic gains.
Thank you, Keith. And I remember last week you were really almost ready to reveal something. Are you ready for that today?
Well, I think there's an upcoming show that I'm booked on that is completely on the topic, that is right
Sounds
in
great.
bullseye of what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to talk more about my new thing then.
Okay, sounds good. Lucy, would you introduce yourself? It's such a pleasure to see you here. I know it's your first time, and we just love that you joined our network.
Thanks, Irina. Thanks for having me. So I'm with ETF, as you can see from my background, the Environmental Technologies Fund. So I'm also a clean tech investor. I'm based in cold and rainy London, as you maybe can tell from my high neck jumper here. Unlike Gary, who looks like he's in a very sunny place, so I don't know if that's a virtual background or not. So we're a London-based firm. I think we're the biggest venture capital group focused solely on clean tech or environmental tech investments. We've been doing it since 2006. We are based in London, but we invest across Europe in a sort of Series A, Series B stage deals. We focus within sustainability. We talk about the smart city. We talk about new energy tech, and we talk about sort of new industry technologies as well. We do a little bit in food like Keith, but we do have a broader focus as well in other things. My personal background, I'm also very passionate about sort of solving our problems with innovation, and I'm very passionate about the environment and the technologies we can use to help it. I've been with ETF for 4 years now. Before that, I worked very briefly as an engineer, and actually got into climate and entrepreneurship through an organization called Climate Kick, which you may be familiar with. Did one of their summer programs, which really got me going in this area. So yeah, very passionate about what we're doing. Think it's a great time to be doing what we're doing, and very happy to be here.
It sounds like you were involved with environment and clean tech before it was cool. Now it's a cool, cool environment, and impact investing is environmental investing.
Trendsetter.
Cool. Yeah. So good. What a great reality we live in. Raghu, what about you?
Hi, Irina. Thank you for having me. It's great to be back on this show. I have been a serial entrepreneur. Initially was in the government space. We did a lot of screening related to homeland security type of things, as well as citizen access to government. But the last about 10 years, I've been working, kind of helping businesses with strategy, all the way from kind of seed to harvest. And I've gotten more into the social impact investing space in the last 3-4 years. Biotech and medtech, cybertech, those are kind of the areas I'm looking at. Working a lot in the biotech space recently, involving large populations, diabetes and cancer.
It's interesting that biotech is also an impact investment as well. We have environment outside of our body, which is exogenous environment, but we also have endogenous environment as well. And making sure that we measure the impacts and invest in that which makes impact for our exogenous environments and endogenous is such a great reminder of that being centered and making sure we look at things from diversified views. Thank you so much, Raghu. And last but not least, Alpesh, welcome back. We were just on the other panel talking about blockchain, and now we're jumping into the environmental impact and clean tech and all the things that are associated with impact investment. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Alpesh Doshi. I'm a tech entrepreneur, worked in tech and data and financial services for 20 years. On the impact side, to be honest, I'm a sort of novice compared to most of you. Been looking and working in the space for a couple of years. And one of the areas that we're working in is around matching. How do you solve the data problem to measure net zero? And that's why that's what we're interested in.
Great, thank you so much. And as we move forward, I would like to talk about the measurements. And I know, Keith, you are really excited to talk about that, because really when we think about impact, it seems it's something that we cannot touch, right? It's something so vague, so far away. And I believe that more investors would get involved with impact investing and understand what that means if we have those measures. And I want to exercise my memory real quick, Keith, and I remember that you said that basically food, water, air, and carbon offset, right? So CO2 are the measurings that we have that we can kind of monetize right now. Is there more to it, and would you expand on that a little bit, please?
Sure. Well, your memory is quite good. The air and the CO2, though, are really just the one category there. And the fourth one was lives impacted from a health perspective. So that was the system we developed at Pangea. You're quite right. One of the big problems that has held back impact investing is this sort of it feels good idea, but I don't know how to get my hands on it. It's a vague concept of doing good, and I like the idea of doing good, but how do I make money with that? And especially, how do I make money for my investors? This is not just for me, okay? I mean, if I'm talking about myself, I can give to charities, I can go and volunteer, there's all kinds of ways that I can have impact. But when I am responsible for a fund of other people's money, I take that very seriously in a completely different way than I take my own money and my own time seriously. And there, it's got to have metrics. It's got to be measurable. And this was the challenge that we set for ourselves at Pangea. We said, we know what we're doing has impact. We know it all is all material efficiencies and energy efficiencies, food, water, air. There's all kinds of ways this is impacting, but how do we express that? And the best way after looking at many different ways, the best way that we determined to do that was to look at measurable impact. It has to be something that is not only measurable, but is efficiently measurable, because we're asking startups to give reports on this. Startups can't afford to pay hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to do environmental assessments and bring in consultants to do the reports and this sort of thing. It has to be easy, and it has to be tied to economic sales, so actual commercial sales of units. Because it doesn't matter how great your idea is on paper, or even if it works in the lab, if it's not out there in the real world, well, then it's not having any impact on carbon dioxide. It's not making any extra food or cleaning up the water or whatever metric you want to have. It has to actually be getting out into the world. This also becomes a simpler way to measure that impact. If you know the impact of 1 unit of your whatever it is that you're selling, or 1 acre of treatment of your new pesticide or new herbicide or whatever it is that's going out in agriculture, and then you can just multiply that by the sales. That becomes a very efficient way to do this, to measure it. It's not burdensome to the startup company and allows a transparent way for you to report these things that is open to question and criticism, but also is defensible. So that's what we elected to do, and Pangea is still reporting that every year in terms of the goals and how they did, how the portfolio did at achieving those goals. And to align with the UN sustainability goals, we set a 2025 horizon to that, to align with the goals as announced in the WEF and the UN.
Yeah, measurable. It's interesting. So at our farm, we have we invested in a regenerative farm, and so it's a traditional farm that's being used a lot of pesticides, herbicides, all the regular. So biodiversity is basically non-existent there. And one of the service providers that we're using to be able to regenerate the topsoil is this basically biodiversity, something that bacteria that eats the herbicides and feeds basically the fungi. And the reason I'm saying that is that they had the measurements, how much per acre it cost, but then also kind of what are the benefits, right? So how much will it increase our biodiversity in a period of time? And so for us, then it made sense to make that investment because it expedited things almost in half, right? So instead of kind of a 10-year pathway that we would have done otherwise naturally, it's shrunk it to 5. That's very measurable for us. It's very important. It's a great business decision. And so we are treating our whole farm this way. And we're actually going to be using them for 3 years to make sure that it gets there. And Lucy, do you have anything to add from your perspective of what are other measurements, and are there other measurements? How do we attach ourselves the money, and how do we receive rewards for investing in impact?
Yeah, so I think Keith made a lot of great points. I think we also work with startups, and the importance of it being easy, but also meaningful is I can really corroborate that. I also think something that we think about as well is is actually the financial stability of a company. So obviously that's separately part of your investment assessment, but we actually also internally have created our own scorecard, our own process of assessing this, and our own process of tracking progress of the companies and impact. And we look at alignment with the SDGs. We look at what we think the impact potential will be if this is rolled out, if a certain company's technology is rolled out fully. But as Keith was touching on as well, we also look at the financial maturity of a company and how stable they are, and what is the probability that this technology is really going to get out there. Because if it doesn't, then your impact is very low. So we think about that. I guess the other thing that, again, is also threaded into any or most of a venture investment assessment is actually, is this a new innovation? So a lot of companies will grow and be successful, but they're not necessarily doing something that's that different or that's that new. And what we want to see from an impact point of view is that this technology is enabling something that no one else can, for example. So we also assess and then track that as well.
That's great, interesting. And you guys are in completely different parts of the world, and it sounds that you have a coherent and strong business plan, which again I think is a great foundation, because a lot of people think that it is something that we do to only just better the planet and make ourselves feel good. It actually makes business sense to invest in an impact. And so with an impact, I want you to think about the impact and impact investment in a way of investing into AI. What kind of impact can be positive and negative, Gary, for investing in AI? How do we measure that impact, the AI impact?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's about, it's interesting, Irina, because if we look at artificial intelligence, a lot of people they say, oh, it's AI. They don't have a clue what it is. In fact, it was really interesting because the top article that I've written, it's got the most views in Forbes, is my deep learning and machine learning article. And it was incredible, actually. It was 10 times what I had gotten. So we don't know really what AI is, and we need to, open up the hood and take a look at it. So door number one is it unsupervised? Is it semi-supervised? Is it AI with emotions? Motion AI, which is the next level of, compassion and those kind of things. And I've written a lot about it. So you can see them in Forbes. I've probably written 15 articles about it. But at the same time, it's about what kind of impact are we going to have? So if we're going to use it for space travel, what kind of impact is it going to have? Remember all the data that each one of us has around it. So even from an environmental standpoint, in 2 weeks, I have the head of Internet of Things from Intel on my show, Samir Sharma, and smart cities. I mean, it's a matter of understanding what we have so we can make corrections, right? What is it? What's happening with potable water? I mean, think about it. We have so many challenges today. We've got 7.8, almost 7.9 billion people on the planet. And even if it slows down, it's 4 times growth in the last 100 years. Think about the challenges with space, how much more efficient we're going to have to be with food, right? Using battery technologies to be able to do things a little bit different. Things like lithium fluoride lithium fluoride batteries, things that are a lot different than what we use today. So our lives, if we don't I talked to an astronaut recently, and he told me when you're up in space and you're looking down at the Earth, you understand how small we really are, right? And that's the way it truly is. So we need to do a much better job. We need to take care of the planet that we have. And in terms of artificial intelligence, the data coming in, making sense of that data so we can make course corrections. And more importantly, which is predicting what's going to happen and taking care of the problem before it's an issue. Think about the issue we have today. It's amazing. In some parts of Florida since 1957, and I'm, by the way, Lucy, I'm in Palm Beach right now in Florida. So it is a virtual background, but actually it's really nice where I am. So I do it because sometimes I'm early in the morning and it's dark. And anyhow, the challenges that we have today is that the levels have gone up on the beach is up 8 inches. 8 inches is a lot, a whole lot. And when you talk about the entire state of Florida on average is about 26 inches above sea level, think about the challenges. I mean, it's a problem. And this isn't just happening here. So we need to go down through and address it. When we have all these, glaciers melting and all the challenges, all these ice sheets, we have, back in the early 90s, I had a chance to work from a guy from Princeton named Irving Crick. Irving Crick did a long-range weather forecasting model that was nonlinear, which weather occurs over time in patterns is just nonlinear. And we were talking about these changes taking place. And I remember it was in the early 90s. He was telling me what was going to happen. And I'm like, he's scared. Gary, they're going to be superstorms, super hurricanes. And I'm, at the time I was like, yeah. Well, guess what? It's here. We have a chance to course correct. But the other thing is, so the data coming in, AI will help us to be able to facilitate and make decisions. AI will help us course correct and predict where it's going to be. AI will go down through and actually make those course corrections for us. So we're investing in it. We're looking for companies all over the world that are in artificial intelligence, specifically, by the way, in impact, so that we can make this planet a little bit better, a little bit cleaner place.
Live it better than we found it. I think that that's the true meaning of impact. It's not just kind of a sustain where it is, but live it better than we found it. And I see it happening all across the borders of technologies. And obviously financial technology has a huge impact on the world as well. And I do want to talk a little bit about that too, because I know, Alpesh, you have a special passion for financial technology. And could you expand a little bit more on that, and what does impact investments mean in a financial technology world?
So, I mean, if the way I look at these things is look at the value chain. You've got corporations at one end, you've got investors, listed markets, mainly, if you talk about listed markets, you've got investors there, whether it's asset managers or wealth managers, and then you've got pension funds, institutional investors. And if you look at that value chain, investors themselves, institutional investors, are all now asking their asset managers, how do you measure impact? Because they have to report. If you're a mandate in a pension fund, they're having to report on that. They have to report their impact as part of their fund mandate. And if you talk to asset managers and say, how are you measuring ESG? The reality is the data isn't there. They don't really collect the data. Yes, there are companies like Sustainalytics and a couple of others doing that, but the actual data really, to be honest, a lot of it's what people call greenwashing. The reality of data is not there. If you then talk to the corporates and say, okay, well, how are you measuring impact? And how are you measuring your ESG ratings? And how are you measuring your sustainability elements? They're not. I can give you a real example. I was talking, Keith mentioned the company he used to run the VC firm for. I was talking to them last week. And I said, how are you measuring your circular economy stuff? And he says, we're not. We've got a massive gap in the data and we don't have the data. So that value chain is a real problem. If you're actually going to measure it across that value chain, different parties, including in financial services, need to be able to measure it. Now, that's great in terms of driving adoption, driving change, because one of the challenges I've seen in sustainability and impact is there's been no incentive to do it. The reality is most corporates will report that in their annual reports, and they're fairly qualitative, not really quantitative data. Now they're having to report, we're going to have to report more accurate data around their initiatives around sustainability and their target to net zero, and measure net zero. How are they going to measure it? How are you going to prove that you are, in quotes, net zero? A lot of companies are committing by 2030 to do something. Well, these are all qualitative measures. How can you get quantitative measures that can prove it and say, this is how we did, and here's the data to prove that we did? So I think there's going to be a big change, and there's where the big opportunity is around pulling the data together. And the financial markets are one of the biggest drivers, because they're looking for new financial products that they want to offer their investors. And so, if you're if they want to be LPs in a fund, for example, they want to invest in an impact project, but they have to measure it. So the value in financial services is the fact that if they have the data, they can invest better and they can create new products, which obviously brings more money into the market, which obviously helps drive projects and investment to create a circular model, if you like, from making change happen. So So for me, I hope that makes sense. You know, financial services
Yes,
is
absolutely.
transformation, but one of the biggest drivers of change and doing sustainability is the financial markets investing money and
Yes.
and pushing the companies they manage and monitor to show them that they're moving towards a sustainable business.
So what I'm hearing is that in order, if you want to invest in financial markets innovation, right, that has a big impact, invest in those that work with data and data analytics. So it sounds amazing to me, and it really comes to two things, right? Data and then AI. So
Yeah.
we need to be able to connect those together. Yes, please.
So the important thing is actually being able to collect the data.
Right.
That's the biggest problem. So if you imagine in oil and gas industry, oil and gas market, you know, they need to collect the data from all of their assets. That's a big problem. I'm not saying it's easy. That's a big problem. And if you imagine any industry, take any industry, you know, Keith mentioned BASF, right? How are they going to possibly measure and get the data to be able to prove their circular economy initiatives?
Yeah.
Are they going to get the data from their suppliers? Are they going to feed that data into their customers? Because people are asking for this stuff. So this is where the challenge comes. This is where the opportunity and the challenge is. And
connecting the data, right? Because we do.
Yeah, so by its nature, it's connected.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And Raghu, what about biotech? I know that you're very interested in biotech, and it seems obvious. Okay, in biotech, we can measure the value by increasing our lives, maybe, and quality of life. But when you start thinking about the matrix of how do we measure impact through biotech, it's more complex than it appears. And so, how would you expand on that?
Yeah, the biotech, the issue is actually the costs are very high. And so you have to kind of look at, since I'm mainly involved in early stage technologies, I look to see how we can get it to something which the big boys can take it to market kind of thing. So it's really about the early stage, how can we take a problem and, you know, make a headway in that so that and I look at what size the population that it impacts. For instance, to give you, there is one company I'm working with in Singapore that is basically doing a drug to treat diabetic peripheral neuropathy. See, diabetes affects more than 100 million people in the world. And in the severe cases, what happens is people lose sensation in their extremities, hands and toes and all that, and which may sometimes have to be amputated. So this is, it's like, you know, probably we all know in our own families, people with diabetes. So this is, right now an unmet need. All they do is give pain medication. So this the company already has a drug which has gone through safety profile and has some promising data in the preclinical stage. And so that's the kind of companies. And there's another company which is working on delivering drugs right into the cancer tumors or into the lymphatic nodes so that the good cells don't get impacted because of the targeting. So which is huge because a lot of these, we know how to treat cancer, but what happens is when we treat the cancer, we kill the patient because it's also having side effects in terms of killing the good cells, right? So those are the kind of things which advance the treatment and the efficacy a lot better than what is the current thing. And of course, longevity is a different issue. I'm more interested in wellness, which automatically will, I think, lead to longevity.
Longevity is definitely a subject that is often is not touched, right? So I advise to a couple governments and on innovations, blockchain innovation for the most part. But when I talk about other innovations, and as soon as I start talking about life expansion, we cannot cover that. We cannot talk about that. That's just too far. Also, on a side note, guys, we will have a life expansion and transformative technology and a biohacking panel here on VCTV. So if you do want to talk about this subject, please join us because these are very important conversations, and especially those conversations that are kind of can be considered challenging. I think we must talk about this. For example, Gary, you were talking about machine learning and AI, right? And often it's just not kind of a differentiator is not discussed there. And I think we must really clearly draw that line in between the two, because investors need to understand what they're investing in. And so, Gary, how would you advise to investors to be able to differentiate between company presenting themselves to be an AI company, artificial intelligence company, and those that are doing machine learning bots?
I mean, you gotta you gotta open the hood and you gotta know what to look for, right? And the challenge is, so a couple ways to do it. One are the results. Are people buying it, and what kind of results do they have? That's door number one. Door number two is open the hood up and take a look inside. So when we open the hood up, we want to see, what are they doing exactly? Explain it to me. What do they have? Knowledge graphs? Do they have ladder networks? Do they understand VAEs? What do they have in there? And, let's just keep it simple, stupid. It's just like if you went to buy a used car, you want to open it up, the hood up, and kick the tires and take it out for a test drive. And so I would talk to some of their customers. I would talk to some of their investors. I would interview the executives, but I would see, are they selling it, or are people buying it? So you're sure that it's not, Dutch tulips. And, where they had the phenomenon where they made the market up and people were buying it, and the rest is history. So you're going to make sure that it's right. It is a fad, but let me tell you, I'm just completing an article, by the way, Irina, on AI, genomes, and genetic entity. So one of my next articles in Forbes Magazine. And then I'm writing an article. By the way, I did a project with Stanford University students with MBAs, my MBAs, on living to 120. This was 5 years ago that I worked on the project. So I'm having another article in Forbes on living to 150. And I'm going to get into some of these details because I thought people were really interested in it, right? Everybody wants to live longer. Well, let's talk about the secret sauce and where the technology and AI and the biology and the chemistry is involved to be able to help us get to those levels. By the way, it's going to happen. It's going to happen sooner than later.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think it's going to happen sooner, guys, because look at us. So deploying and building and connecting, it's inevitable, and we are empowered to do better. Keith, when we think about agriculture, it's a very important topic, right? Because obviously loss of a topsoil globally is a huge problem. It's one of the bigger crises that we don't talk about. And now that investors are kind of starting to say, well, I would like to invest in that. What would you advise to them? Kind of what are areas of opportunities that are the most crucial right now, and that are kind of, if you would, a low-hanging fruit that allows them to get into a deeper understanding and invest in kind of a more long-term visions?
Sure. Yeah, it is the biggest impact area, what we found, because it impacts not only CO2, of course, food production and water, but there are all of these secondary impacts that you don't necessarily think of. For example, agriculture has enormous energy inputs that go into it. And if you can make agriculture more efficient, you can reduce those energy inputs and thereby reduce the CO2 emissions that are associated with those. Agriculture suffers from terrible logistics and supply chain problems, again, that have CO2 emissions associated with them. There's all kinds of room for efficiency improvements there. And for an investor who's just sort of looking at this area, I would say to start from an area that is familiar to them. If somebody comes from the software world, as most investors do, there's certainly a lot of things can be done there. Gary's focus on AI, every time Gary is talking, I start thinking about all these great things that I've seen that I'm excited about, that I want to look further into, because the impact of AI on, well, any industry, but you asked specifically about agriculture, can be enormous. I keep seeing a more and more sophisticated, under the hood, but simple from a user interface perspective, approaches to do precision agriculture. things started off with like satellite imagery, and then things have moved on to drones and dispersed sensors and things like this. Increasingly, though, we're seeing things where AI is able to spot very small differences in the color of the foliage, which tells, which then can be interpreted by the AI to let you know, hey, these nutrients are missing. There's more water that's needed here.
Can I give a real example? Can I give a real example? Because we just worked on exactly a project like that. So what we did was the client basically wanted to detect weeds in their sugar beet plants. So they sell seeds to customers and they wanted to detect weeds in sugar beet plants. So we built a computer vision and deep learning model to do that. So they supplied us with some images, and we basically built a deep learning algorithm to be able to do that. So now what they're doing is want to build an app for farmers so they could then sell that to the farmer and be able to do exactly that, to be able to do some of the things. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's object detection, partially so you can expand the model. So we've built the object at the moment to look at weeds, but actually you can expand the model around agri. And so what we're also talking about is providing drones. So at the moment it's just on a phone, but the idea is to provide it on a drone so the drone can go overhead and actually merge it with satellite data. So I'm talking to a satellite data company. So you're taking satellite data, drone data, and local image data, merging that to be able to give a complete view to a farmer, which you can't do today. So and based on deep learning, this is a real example. We've just done this in the last 3 months.
That is so great. Thank you for jumping in and using this as a real use case. I really appreciate it. I want that app, so I need it. Thank you. Yes, and
yeah,
we'll connect. Right, we'll connect about it. Lucy, would you tell us a little bit more about what's happening in Europe when it comes to impact, and for those companies who are in the United States and they would like to kind of go to the European market, what would be your advice for them?
Well, I think firstly, the world of impact in Europe is heating up a lot. So, I mean, I've been in the industry for 4 years and I've noticed a massive change over that time alone. So I think it's changing pretty quickly. Certainly, as you say, we were doing this before it was cool. So you know, we've been doing this since 2006, a time when there were very few funds doing this. And now I hear about a new fund every week. Which is both a challenge and a positive for us, because you know we want our space to grow and we've got more people to work with and great companies and great entrepreneurs. So I think that the space is super hot in Europe. Now I think the other thing we're seeing is a lot more interest from US investors and US companies in coming over and spending time in Europe and meeting European companies. So I think, I mean, coming over here and speaking to people, I think a great way to do it is speak to the funds, and that's a good way to get a foot in the door, or invest in a fund. We have you know, our LPs are global LPs, and a lot of them enjoy the relationship into Europe through that. So I think that's a good way to get a foot in the door into innovation in Europe. And certainly I think it's a very interesting space for impact and innovation.
Thank you. It's very insightful. We're living on a global environment, and I think that now that we're so physically disconnected, we're realizing how important these connections are. Gaurav, I know that I'm sorry, Raghu. I apologize. I know that I want to talk a little bit more for you about biotech, and for the investors who want to get into biotech but have no experience in biotech. What would you be like the reason of the truth of how they can look at the startups, not the existing later stage companies, but really startups? How they can get into this area?
Sure. I think the way to look for de-risking is, there is the biggest risk in biotech life sciences area is the discovery phase, whether it's medical devices or drugs or whatever. The discovery phase where they're trying to find, they found something that works, right? They have to go through cycles of stuff. And so that discovery phase, actually AI can help. I'm sure Gary has looked into that space as well. The discovery space is where I think only about 10% of the biotech succeed, right? Most of them fail in the discovery phase. So discovery phase, I would say that, again, it's very, very dependent on the particular skill set and passion of the team, right? The entrepreneurs. So some of them come with, a mix of skills. Diversity is very important. In addition to the science, I think you also need somebody who understands, for instance, how to patent things or know what is out there, that they're actually creating something new and not, reinventing the wheel that's already been done. So because it's pretty vast, the literature that's out there. So I think the key de-risking factors are if the discovery phase, how they're going, and you have to fail early, because if you eat up a lot of money and then fail, that doesn't help anybody. And also, what is the failed studies don't usually get shared. This is another sad aspect of this. Only the things that succeed get patented, or is even those, if it is patented, it's available to everybody. But things where some clinical study fails, that doesn't usually get, the data doesn't get reported. So for AI or something to actually use that, it is not available generally. It's still within the company itself. So that's actually something that without, we should have some incentive for companies to share, data of failed efforts as well, so that there's a lot of learning there, right? So I would look at the discovery part. The second is the team. If the team has all the components that is needed, which is science, there is, I would say, business aspect as well, because the business cycle is very different because of the regulatory aspects that are involved. So you have to, it doesn't matter that the science works in certain situation, but it has to work, through the regulatory process, and you have to know how to get it through without a large cost. And then you have to be practical, what it is that you can do, what, the big pharma machines can do. So I think the understanding of that is crucial, because you can't solve the whole world problem in a startup usually. So
Yes.
you can take it to somebody else who can solve it. That's how I think I look at it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds to me that all of these practices are generally good investment practices, right? For other industries as well. To you, dear viewers, if you're an investor and you're looking forward to investing, or you're looking to diversify your investment, and you're looking whether it is to investing in AI or agriculture, impact, financial technology, whatever that might be, biotech, follow our speakers on Ally Token. You can see all of the profiles. Follow them. I think that follow investment is great. For example, if you want to understand what are really great opportunities in AI, follow Gary. He'll share opportunities with you. It's a great way for you to get into the industry. We're getting to the top of the hour. I apologize. I am in a family farm, and we have a family reunion right now. So my kid coming in and out of the RV right now. So my apologies for the sound. But before I let you guys go, could you please share what's the best way to contact you and quick closing thoughts? Keith, let's start with you.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Keith Gillard. Follow me on Twitter at Keith A. Gillard. And I'll be announcing soon my new entity.
Thank you, Keith. Alpesh.
Hey guys, I'm Alpesh Doshi. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alpesh Doshi, and on Twitter at Alpesh Doshi. And yeah, there you go.
Raghu?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's Raghu Rao. I think if you search on angel investor, you'll find me. So.
Lucy?
Also LinkedIn. I do have a Twitter, but it's not very interesting as I don't post on there. So LinkedIn is best. Lucy Rands.
Sounds good. Thank you. And Gary, what about you?
Yeah, sure. You can see me on LinkedIn, Gary Fowler. I have a couple of shows. Check them out. GSD Presents. And so final thoughts, live longer, live better, stay happy.
That is great. I will keep that and make that my motto because I really like that. And I love that it starts with live longer. Thank you so much for taking your time to share and to contribute to this network, and to also helping us expand our network as well, because every day we have more viewers, we have more new investors, entrepreneurs that are coming into this network, and ability for us to share the information, ability for us to share our wisdom, and also to share our deal flow is very important, since we're unable to do that in person. And entrepreneurs, I want to encourage you to contact the LA Token. Please pitch to us. We want to see you here. Don't wait until you make a perfect deck. Pitch now. We'll give you our advice, then you will take our advice, and then you'll pitch again. And that's how you grow unicorns. And we want you to be unicorns all over the world. And with that, thank you so much for LA Token. Thank you to VCTV team. Thank you, Kyle, for this opportunity. I hope I represented your large shoes, at least with my little ballet point toes. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to coming back tomorrow to Singapore. Please tune in as well. And thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.